He's the lead broadcaster, and he is the managing editor at Vegas Stats and Information Network, Raiders play-by-play voice, and one of the great broadcasters in history. He's Mr. Vegas. He's Brent Musburger joins us on the program. Good morning, Brent. How are you?
Good morning, Dan. I'm fine. How are you, lad?
I'm doing well. How much money did you have on last night's game?
Let's say I have to still continue working. Yeah, my Tide didn't. Probably my worst pick of the year, but I guess Nick Saban has to lose a big game every now and again. It was an interesting game, far different from many of the college championship games that we have seen. But listen, hail Georgia. And speaking of Georgia, what about what that state has done? They win the World Series with the Braves, and now they win the National College Championship, with the Bulldogs. And what's wrong with the Falcons? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's not going to happen anytime soon there. Little pressure on the Atlanta Hawks. Do you have a limit on how much you bet?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm strictly a recreational bettor. I would have been busted a long time ago if I tried to make a living out of it. Listen, I'm more of a $100 bettor than a $1,000 bettor.
Okay.
That's what I would say, Dan.
Best bet you ever made?
Best bet I ever made probably was on. Most recent was certainly the Raiders on last Sunday's game when we went far into the night to finally beat the Los Angeles Chargers. That certainly is the most recent one that I've been able to catch. I also had the Raiders over 7.5 wins. I thought that was a low total for them going into the season, but I had to sweat it out in the end. And, of course, with their win streak at the end of the season, they did go past and wound up with 10 victories.
I'm trying to understand the fallout from the Chargers-Raiders game, that the criticism that Brandon Staley is receiving. Do you think the Raiders were going to play for the tie?
Well, I think the possibility existed, okay? I don't think they wanted to put Carlson on a field for nearly a 60-yard field goal. However, I really don't blame Staley and the Chargers for that timeout, Dan. They failed to execute when Josh Jacobs got loose on that last run. I mean, somebody could have stepped in there and made the tackle, and then it would have been up to the Raiders to make the consideration. I certainly think that they were thinking about it over on the sideline, because if they had missed a long field goal at that instance with a handful of seconds left, then you certainly would have given Herbert one final chance to push it down the field, and he was magnificent in the fourth quarter. But Staley wanted to adjust his personnel on the field. The linebacker that he took out, Murray, has been a bit of a disappointment to the Chargers, and he took himself out of the game earlier in the fourth quarter. I just happened to notice that from up in the radio booth. They wanted to get him out for a stouter run defender, and it didn't work out. Jacobs made the cut, and they didn't execute. But I honestly don't. We don't know what would have happened if they hadn't called the timeout and kept the pressure. The one thing that the Raiders did do after the timeout, which might have made it easier for Jacobs, Carr had lined up, was going to be in the shotgun before the Chargers called the timeout, and then he moved up underneath center. That allows him, when he pivots, to hand off. Jacobs can be moving at a higher rate when he hits that line, and that may have helped Jacobs explode and then pick up the additional yards, and they were able to bring Carlson out for the tight end. I honestly blame Staley more for his fourth down, going for it back on his own 18-yard line. I thought that was completely arrogant. Now, we didn't score a touchdown after that, but we did kick a field goal. And I think, listen, I understand analytics, but you don't win games with analytics. You win it with human beings. And you had the better football team. I don't think there's any question that man for man, the Chargers have better talent and more experienced talent down the line. So you go ahead and punt in that situation and let your team take over. I thought that was the biggest mistake that he made, not necessarily the final timeout that everyone seems to be talking about.
But Al Davis would be rolling over in his grave if he knew the Raiders played for a tie and allowed a divisional opponent to make the playoffs. Like, nobody's talking about that, Brent, that the Raiders, I guess, gave consideration to play for a tie.
Exactly. And can you imagine, Dan, what was going on in the city of Pittsburgh?
Yeah.
I mean, it was past midnight, and if the game had wound up in a tie, as you say, a division opponent, the Chargers would have also gotten into the playoffs. There's one other thing that you should consider about the Raiders' decision, and I'm assuming that the coaching staff knew about it. If the Raiders had tied the Chargers and both had gone to the playoffs, the Raiders would be going to Kansas City this week and not Cincinnati. Now, I'm not taking any away from Cincinnati. Joe Burrow, a marvelous young quarterback, okay? But the Raiders, they want no part of the Kansas City Chiefs again. I mean, the Chiefs have put 40 points on them in each of their two victories this season. So obviously they would prefer to go to Cincinnati, although the Bengals, I've got to point out, the Bengals put 31 on them in Las Vegas, and Burrow didn't even throw for many yards. Derek Carr made a couple of big mistakes in the fourth quarter, and the Bengals pounced on it and won the game rather easily. But I think any coach would say, yeah, I think I'd rather go play the Bengals. There's a question about that injury that Burrow suffered a couple of weeks ago, rather than go in and face the Chiefs.
I agree, Brent. I brought that up yesterday. I'm like, people are missing a bigger story here. You don't want to play Kansas City because they've blown you out both times. And yes, you have to go cross-country to play against Cincinnati, but Cincinnati, they're newbies getting into the playoffs here. Like, you want to play for the win. I had people who said this yesterday, the Raiders still hold a grudge against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they would have tried to keep the Steelers. I'm going, these players now have no idea what the hell happened with the Immaculate Reception. Exactly. I mean, come on. They want to keep Pittsburgh. They won Pittsburgh. I'd rather face Pittsburgh in the playoffs than I would the Chargers. So,
For sure. Because remember now, the Raiders went to Pittsburgh first of the season, and they beat the Steelers in Pittsburgh. There's certainly no doubt about it. That I don't think that prospect ever entered into their mind.
I don't think so either.
You have to be selfish. You have to be selfish down on the sideline, and so be it. I mean, I will tell you that Josh Jacobs, from my mind, played his best game of the year. He has not been completely healthy, and it showed up on that run. And then, Daniel Carlson has been the Iceman, and, 5 game-winning kicks. My goodness, what a year he's had as a kicker. And so be it. And I'm happy for Derek Carr. He finally gets to play in a playoff game. The last time the Raiders made it, he was a quarterback, but he suffered a broken leg. Week 16, he did not play down in Houston, and the Texans eliminated the Raiders. But it'll be interesting because, Dan, as you so well know, the Cincinnati Bengals have had that long playoff drought, okay? You have to – I don't even know that Bo Jackson was in the NFL the last time the Bengals won a playoff game. So that's a long, long time ago. And we'll see what happens. I'm sure the city is very excited. I can't wait to see my favorite restaurateur, Jeff Ruby. Speaking of guys who like to wager on football games, Jeff is a degenerate bettor. I mean, he frequently texts for information. What do you think this week? What do you think?
We're talking to Brent Musburger. He's the voice of the Raiders. They have the game with the Bengals coming up this weekend. All these tributes to John Madden. I forgot that was that at the Rose Bowl that you worked with John when you were at CBS?
Yes, it was at the Rose Bowl.
The Super Bowl.
But it was a Super Bowl, and it was the Rams who were playing the Steelers. And to give you a background, we had signed John, and we weren't too sure if he was going to be better in the studio or doing games. And so we put John up on the roof, and he was talking primarily about the Steelers, the AFC. And we also signed George Allen, and he was going to talk about the NFC. So I had both of them up on the roof. And by the time I got finished, I said to Van Gordon's daughter, who was our head of the sports I said, Van, John Madden's got potential to be a star. He's just so entertaining when he talks. You never know where he's going to go, and you listen carefully to him. And he was a star up on the roof that day. There was no doubt about it. Terry Bradshaw on the Steelers, of course, defeated Vince Ferragamo and the Rams and won that particular Super Bowl. And then the thing about John is that Van Gordon's daughter, rather than start him out with Pat Summerall or Vince Scully, who are our two lead play-by-play guys, he put him with Gary Bender. And Gary Bender really, really taught John Madden the ins and outs of working up at a booth, and it was such a good relationship. And then when the debate began as to who Madden would work with, Van again made an outstanding decision. Van initially wanted him to work with Vince Scully. And then he was talked out of it by several people on the staff who felt that John would have more breathing room working a booth with Summerall, and it was a fantastic decision because the rest is history. John, one of the more entertaining people that I've ever been around. We finished up our NFC coverage. We didn't have the Super Bowl one year in Chicago, and John, of course, was riding the train then. A lot of people thought he was fearful of flying. That's not the case. He was claustrophobic, and we always had a room in a hotel, either the third floor or lower for him. But I kind of felt sorry for him headed to the train station, and I said, John, let me cancel my airplane reservation. We'll take the train back to New York, and of course it was the wintertime. And I'll never forget, we had two breakdowns, one in upstate New York, and I think we got into Grand Central about 16, 18 hours. So I left. I said, John, I love you, my man. You're great. But I just took my last train trip back from a football game. Yeah, he was, Dan, he was a delight. What a great life. First of all, one of the more entertaining coaches.
Why did he retire at 42, though, Brent?
Well, I think he was exhausted. And listen, part of it was still the claustrophobia. I mean, and the claustrophobia includes not wanting to get into a tightly controlled airplane up in the air. Okay, wow. I mean that was not a small part, but he felt he'd done what he'd done, and it was time to move on. And he had the two sons, and a great family man, and so he took a shot at broadcasting. Didn't know anything about it. Hadn't paid a whole lot of attention to it, and was able to come in and be the most dominant analyst, certainly, of our time. I tell young analysts, I say, listen, the one thing that John did better than any analyst is didn't start talking right away. He used his monitor. They fail to understand that the camera sees so much more than the naked eye, and week after week after week, I hear these guys jump in, and they really don't know what they're looking at. Okay, last night there was chaos in the early going, and what appeared to be, for example, a Georgia touchdown on a fumble, and then the truck. You have to be very patient, and John always was, because you wait for that right angle to come back, which showed clearly that Bryce Young's arm was moving forward last night, and John was outstanding, and then. We had a cameraman at CBS that John Madden controlled, and during the game, he would look for those sidebar stories, what's under the bench and what kind of gloves were players wearing.
Wait, how did he control the cameraman?
Well, he was the one who would tell the truck, go over to the Cowboys bench. I look behind it. I see some things over there that look interesting. He would tell the truck during commercial timeouts to send the sideline cameraman to look for those especially if the game was close down and important and things were going back and forth, he didn't worry so much about that. But John Madden was the greatest ever in a blowout, okay, because he looked for those sidebar stories that kept you entertained, gave you a chuckle going forward. Of course, he invented Thanksgiving with the turkey presentation after the game. And those were ideas that came from John Madden. And also, he was the first analyst who insisted that there was a meeting the night before the game. I know of pregame meetings in which the crew was actually in there for about 3 hours looking at tape with John, and he would go over different things. he was a teacher as much as anything else when he worked back in the days at CBS as our top analyst.
Always great to catch up with you. Good luck this weekend against the Bengals, and we'll catch up with you soon. Thank you, Brent.
You got it, Dan. Take care, my man.
That's Brent Musburger, Hall of Famer. I can listen to those stories. You know, sometimes you forget stories that you have. And Brent's been around, since the early 70s. It's like Al Michaels. They just have incredible memories.